So we'll get back to COVID. We have the story from from the Washington Post. I love how we were just ragging on the Washington Post, and now we're going to rag on them again. On Saturday Night Live, Woody Harrelson pushes popular COVID-19 conspiracy theory. The actor worked in a joke during his monologue that repeated a pandemic plot favored by vaccination opponents. Notice how she didn't say exactly in the headline what he said. Because what he really, and I don't think they even actually
even in the first 3 paragraphs?
Oh, no. Here it is. Yeah, he says, do they have the quote? He says, in a monologue filled with references to his abiding use of marijuana, the actor who went...
I mean, that's hilarious just right there, because the left has always historically been like the pro-pot side.
And now they're like...
But now they're using it as a cudgel to beat him with, only because he's not saying what
Here's what he said.
Drug-addled guys.
He read a script where the biggest drug cartels in the world get together to buy up all the media and all the politicians and force all the people in the world to stay locked in their homes. And people can only come out if they take the cartel's drugs and keep taking them over and over. I threw the script away. I mean, who's going to believe that crazy idea? Being forced to do drugs? I'd do that voluntarily all day long. And so that was his joke. And the live audience offered scattered laughter, but viewers at home had much more visceral reactions. What I love is, it's like there's like a paradox in this article. The media is being made fun of for calling this an anti-vax conspiracy. It's like, well, hold on there a minute. Big Pharma literally lobbies the government. That's not in dispute. Yeah. They go to politicians and they say...
More than any other industry.
Yeah, they're massive. They made $100 billion. They had guaranteed no liability contracts. And we've all seen the video, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer.
They brought us everything cool this year.
They're buying ads like crazy. They buy ads like crazy. They sell products. They lobby politicians. Woody Harrelson wasn't saying any kind of conspiracy theory. No. He was making a joke about... every joke has its truth. Big pharmaceutical corporations lobbied government and the media to try and convince people to take their drugs. It's a product. They got no liability contracts, made a lot of money off it. Now they're calling Woody Harrelson a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not here to talk about the negative. And I don't want to sit here and just rag on media like we always do. I want to praise Woody Harrelson and say, hey, look, man, people are pushing back. This is a mainstream celebrity hosting SNL, talking about we should not let massive multinational corporations dictate what we can or can't do. That seemed to be the message, right? All right, so we're good. All right. Victory?
Yes.
I just think it's funny that they're like, you're a conspiracy theorist. Like, if this wasn't a direct comparison to what you were doing, you wouldn't be so threatened by it. Like, if you weren't doing something shifty, don't freak out, right? I just think his monologue, first off, like, it wasn't the funniest monologue in all of SNL history. It's just that he came close to a subject that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, he touched the third rail.
And then everyone lined up exactly like you thought they would. Like the Washington Post, everyone else is like conspiracy theorists.
Maybe because he was saying people were locked in their homes. In the United States, I'd have never heard of anyone being locked in. They were in China. I heard they were being welded into their homes, so locked in.
Yeah, China was way more severe.
Australia were sending people to camps where they couldn't leave their front porch, so locked in that instance.
But they're locked in
camps in Australia.
Some respects, because you couldn't go to school, you weren't allowed to go to businesses.
Functionally locked.
Functionally, you couldn't go anywhere. You weren't allowed to go to parks. They filled in the sand pits at the skate parks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they kept they took away anything that would be worth leaving your house for.
But I like how in Australia, they went to indigenous areas and neighborhoods and literally kidnapped children and then brought them to camps. And then there was one viral story where some teenagers jumped the fence and escaped and ran for it. And they got hunted down.
And they got picked up at a bar. They were hanging out at that night.
And I'm like, these are concentration camps. And then people like Claire Lehman of Quillette were like, no, it's not. The government taking people and concentrating them in one area without charge or trial is not a concentration camp. Stop being so silly.
It's for their own good. Stop the spread.
And I'm like, the government's rounding up indigenous Australians and putting them in camps. And they're like, but because of COVID. And I'm like, I didn't say not because of COVID. I just said they're doing it.
I think that Woody making this joke and talking about this publicly on one of the most popular television shows on earth and being one of the most popular actors on earth, alongside with the government's acknowledgement that it was made in a laboratory, most likely, or they've concluded that it was probably done in a lab.
Low confidence.
I think it's all happening at once, and it's great.
Can I just, I want to say something, because, I have this here Coca-Cola in a glass bottle that I just drank before the show. And I don't drink a lot of soda, if ever. But we do have guests who do like soda. And so, I don't want to get cans. Cans are okay, or bottles, plastic bottles, get out of here. So we got glass bottle Coke with real sugar, real cane sugar. And of course, everyone knows this is the famous Mexican Coca-Cola. And I was just drinking this and I thought to myself, that's kind of crazy that in Mexico, you will get a glass bottle, no phthalates, no PCBs, no endocrine disruptors, made with cane sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, and it's probably cheaper in Mexico in terms of buying power. So in terms of the Mexican economy, how much you have to work to get a Coke is probably less work than in the United States. But in the US, you're getting plastic garbage with endocrine disruptors and high fructose corn syrup. Isn't that just weird? Like in the United States, we are poisoning and degrading ourselves. Like, why? I don't know.
By choice. I mean, I think we're the only country that mandates fluoride in the water, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know about the only country.
We may be. If we're not the only, it's very few. I was going to say this earlier too, just to give people some perspective. In 2000,
no, everybody does it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought Europe. Oh, I know that you can't in Europe. Most European countries, it's not mandated.
A bunch of the UN countries.
Yeah.
I think the dark red ones are mandated. And then the other ones are like, I don't know.
We're one of the only.
In
doesn't
Australia,
really-
it's mandated.
And then what was that South American country?
It doesn't explain what the different shades
Ecuador?
mean, but
No, what is that country?
which one where?
South America.
This?
Yeah.
That looks like, is that Venezuela? Is that Colombia? Or I think it's Colombia, is it?
Bolivia and Colombia. That's so sad that I don't know that. I think Colombia and Bolivia are in the middle, but let's just check. Who knows? Somebody knows in the chat.
What were you saying?
People are gonna be like,
I was going to
"Bro."
say, just for perspective, so people understand, in 2022, the pharmaceutical industry spent $284 million on lobbying, right? So to give some comparison, my opponents
Colombia.
on the anti-gun side of the table always talk about how much money that the gun lobby spends. It was less than 14 million. So 280 something million pharmaceutical industry versus less than 14.
Maybe we
What
just
year?
maybe we need to get it so that
2022,
you get
last year.
the vaccines are delivered by
Gunshot.
Dude,
less lethal, plastic, and it'll be like a pepper ball of some
I
sort.
mean, wasn't that was X-Men, right?
Was it? Oh yeah, they had the cure. They would shoot with a tranq dart.
Yeah.
Maybe
thank you.
Maybe that's the roundabout way you do it. You have the Republicans pass a law saying that vaccines can only be delivered by a dart of some sort fired from a gun. Then they get the pharmaceutical lobby being like, "Don't ban guns. Don't ban them."
We love those. They're necessary.
Yeah.
But
then they're going to be like, you pull them to a 7-Eleven parking lot, and the doctor goes, "Don't move," hits you in the arm, and you're like, "Oh, I feel great, doc."
You know. Oh, what are you gonna say?
No, you go.
I haven't been taking people keep sending me these stories about graphene being in the vaccines and that people are being tracked.
No.
There's actually a patent where they want to track people based on the graphene in their bloodstream or something. And I just keep dismissing it because it sounds so ridiculous. But I just received like 3 messages about it over the weekend. I want to pull it up.
I really do not believe there's graphene.
No, there is. There's graphene in the vaccine. Who did died suddenly? They did a whole report on this. I can send you a link if you want.
But like, to what extent and what's the point of it and what does it do?
That is beyond my graphene knowledge. I'm going to send the report to Ian and he'll let us all know.
If that's true, then I got to question Ian's loyalties. Who are you working for, Ian?
But the thing about materials
He's
is
working
they'll be
for
used
Pfizer.
for
He's a
good
plan.
and
I knew it.
It's a plan.
like the
Everyone's
nuclear
like,
bomb,
"We know it."
the nuclear program was so amazing because it ended up winning us the war, World War II, but also so devastating because it gave people access to nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Same with graphene. It's going
There's
to be
a duality to everything.
Yeah, it'll be remaking roads, buildings, rails, all that, but people will be making new weapons with it, tracking.
Yeah, I mean that's the history
electronics.
of the fight. I mean the reason that we have such a robust defense and in particular firearms industry here in this country is because we won the revolution, and now all of a sudden we're on our own. The French were our allies only insofar as they want to, but now they see us as a young, potentially vulnerable nation. We were buying all of our weapons from our allies or what we took over with us from Britain, and so we basically had to recreate our own weapons manufacturing. I mean, this is of course back in the day when everything was made by hand, right? I mean, lock, stock, and barrel. That was the old saying. So
the corporate press says
that's why it's such a big industry here. People don't really understand. They think how did that culture develop here in the U.S. But it was because we had to create it literally from scratch to be able to defend ourselves.
The corporate press says no graphene oxide in the vaccines. I wonder if what people are confusing is that they used graphene oxide in the manufacturing process. It is not in the vaccine because some of the things I'm seeing are people talking about fetal cells in the vaccine. Fetal cells are used in the development of these, in like testing and production, but the final product doesn't contain the cells themselves. I actually think that's an argument what we saw a lot of was people saying they didn't want to take it because they used fetal cells to make the vaccine. And then the media was like, no, there's no fetal cells in the vaccine. Well, hold on. That's not what people were saying. They were saying that to make the product, to invent it, to test it, you used fetal cells. So we're not okay with that. It's like we, in order to test this, we injected a bunch of monkeys. Those monkeys died. But don't worry, these vaccines contain no monkey. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you killed monkeys to do it. So I don't know to what extent people are talking about graphene oxide, but I think it was maybe in like the manufacturing process.
That's my guess. A lot of times that's a big problem with the food industry is they'll show you the ingredients of the food, but they don't show you what chemicals were used in the treatment of the machinery before the food was processed a lot of times. And sometimes you have toxic chemicals used to clean metal or something.
And how do you completely get that off, especially for like food manufacturing, right?
You don't. I don't think you really can. Way. You have residue. Justin, you were talking about the weapons manufacturers in the United States. I'm wondering, from your perspective as a weapons manufacturing company or head CEO, you're the executive. Like, what are your thoughts on the military-industrial complex? Just because lately, I used to think I didn't know anything about them. Then 2007, I was like, they're the villains. Now I'm like, wait, we have the military-industrial complex in the United States. If it was in another country, we'd be living in the servitude of that
we would be their customer. I mean,
how do you find them as like an evil, unstoppable force, or what do you think about this thing?
Well, I think they've become that in many ways. It's a profit generating industry, and so in today's society where it's easy for them to say, well, we can just start another war, and that will be our development ground for where we make advancements and we test things. I mean, that's where we are today, but that's not where it was when we began, right? I mean, like I said, we developed this industry in the U.S. because we had to. We had to be able to make our own guns to defend a young, up and coming country, and so as it's developed over time, and we've post World War II, obviously the rest of the world is mostly in shambles. We're running strong. We were really the only country left that could produce much of anything. So we basically became the supplier to the rest of the world for advanced weaponry. So as power has become concentrated in those industries, I mean, the military-industrial complex is a real thing, and that's way over my purview in the sense that we're very detached from that. They're much larger than us. It's something that I can't even fathom. These are people that are connected with politicians, and they're making backroom deals, and they're writing the legislation. They're deciding where we're going to fight the next war, all of those things. So I think it's an unfortunate product of reality. When you have an industry that makes money off of the development of weapons technology, eventually somewhere along the line, like the development of the nuclear bomb, so somebody looks at the atom and says, oh, we could make a bomb with this. And if that's the guy that gets all the money and all the funding, then we're going to make a bunch of bombs. And so in the military-industrial complex, you have some guy in there at one point that says, hey, we could actually make a lot of money if we just started our own wars, right? Instead of waiting for the next war to happen and then figuring out which side we're going to supply. I mean, I think that's probably gone on forever.
It's like
people have been supplying both sides of every conflict going back
have you
forever,
seen Sherlock Holmes, Game of Shadows? Mm-mm. The movie plot is basically, spoiler alert for this 15-year-old movie or whatever. Moriarty he owns portions of all these different companies and manufacturers in different countries, and he wants a world war to start so that he can be the financier and have debt in all of these different places and own everything. And I guess the premise of the film is the industrialization of war, and they the first machine pistol, and he's like, whoa, it's like what is this? And they're all shocked by it. And then at the end, Moriarty's like, war on the industrial level is coming. You can't stop it.
Yeah. Well, and naturally, technology typically has something that eclipses it, and that business dies away. But with the war industry, they just continue to up the ante, and if you give them a chance to test it,
bioweapons.
Yeah, and then we tell other countries, well, you can't develop your own. Whichever side you are on, so Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon, and we've decided that we can't allow that to happen. And so not only do we have these large companies here in the U.S. that are making all the weapons, but they're actively lobbying along with politicians to not allow that kind of weapons technology to be developed anywhere else. So, I mean, of course, it's going to be concentrated here because we won't allow that industry to grow. Imagine if, pick a country that we don't really like. We're going to do everything that we can within our power. I mean, we really can't tell China what to do, but some country that we can actually exert influence over, we're going to do everything that we can to prevent them from growing a weapons industry because we don't want that to impact the companies that we've got here.
Yeah, which are five of the six largest are American. The sixth is British, and I look at it as a monopoly
for sure.
And you might laugh and be like, "Duh," but like literally, what they've done is they've broken it into six companies that are technically different companies, but they're all American-British manufacturing. There's Raytheon, Lockheed Martin's the number one, then it's Boeing, Raytheon, BAE is the British one, then there's Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics.
What does BAE stand for?
BAE Systems.
BAE Systems is the company. I don't know what it
stands
initials,
for
maybe.
off the top of my head. We'll find out. BAE.
Halliburton. Where you said Halliburton?
Halliburton's not in the top leading weapons manufacturers.
Halliburton's not really a weapons. They're more of a general contractor. They just
nation
they
build.
They nation build exactly.
Beyond that is Airbus, which is trans-European. Now we're starting to look at the non-British American alliances. There's Thales in France. It's only worth $9 billion. The American British ones are like $20 billion and up. So they constitute $140 billion. Probably like 95% of the weapons manufacturers on Earth, something like that, are American British. Then you get to Leonardo, which is Italian at $8.8 billion, and Almaz Anti and Russian $8.5 billion. That's the first Russian manufacturing. So yeah, I think that there is a monopoly on weapons manufacturing controlled by the British Empire, American industry being the weaponization arm of the British Empire. Mm-hmm. It's concerning. I don't know any way around it. I don't even know if it's the worst case scenario. I mean, it's better than the Chinese. I'm not a warmonger, but I understand the value of war and the necessity of it at times. So
and obviously those companies have developed a lot of this technology that have civilian uses and civilian purposes. And some of those things started off maybe with like a lot of the things that came out of DARPA have had, anything having to do with lasers, for example. Lasers have a lot of scientific research uses. They also have use for offensive weaponry. There's just no way around that. The internet, all of these things, a lot of them are products of weapons development and DARPA and the government investing in things, and you have some aspect that's going to be useful for civilian purposes, and then you're going to have some aspect that's going to be useful for military purposes.
Roads, that's another example. The Roman roadways was like the greatest military breakthrough of
way to
the
move
time.
troops, exactly. Yeah.
How did you start your business? I'm just curious. You guys might know the origin story already.
Kind of happenstance, to be honest with you. So this was in 2015. I was working for an insurance company, and it was an insurance company that specialized in dealing with manufacturers. So everybody I dealt with around the Detroit area was in the manufacturing business of some kind, small tool and die shops, all the way up to big plastics manufacturing companies with 200 employees. That was kind of our niche market. And so I was looking to get out of that industry, and I had developed an affinity for what they did. I saw these guys that, they were building whatever, widgets, parts, and on the worst day of their lives, their wife could be divorcing them, they could be having the crappiest day possible, but they could look at the product that they made and be satisfied that they put their craftsmanship into it.
Yeah.
And so I was jealous of them in that way because, I'm selling insurance.
They had something tangible
who cares,
at the end of the
right?
day.
It's a book full of paper that you hope you never have to open because that's the worst day of your life probably, So my younger brother was working for a small ammunition reloading company at the time. And, this was like the tail end of the Obama presidency. So this was post Sandy Hook. There was a big boom in the firearms industry as a result. There was a lot of regulation that people were afraid of. The cost of ammunition was really high because the demand was very high. And again, at that time, the whole ammo industry was controlled by a small group of companies. Winchester, Remington, Federal,
right.
These big players. So you had a lot of small companies starting to get into the business of making ammo because they saw a market for it. Mm-hmm. And so the guy who owned the company that he worked for passed away, and it was like a side business. He was like a rich guy, had a couple of other businesses. So my brother called me and said, hey, I think we can buy this equipment for not that much money. I know you're thinking about wanting to do something else. What do you think about this? And so I thought about it for a while. We bought the equipment, and I wrote it was in April of 2015. So my background is finance and that type of thing. Yeah. So I wrote a business plan, and we put the pieces together. I tried to find some venture capital, some money to fund it, struck out on that, and basically decided I was going to cash in my retirement plan and kind of go all in. So we got up and running right before the 2016 election, or 2015, 2016 election.
Did you do that? Did you want to be ahead of an election year? Does that influence gun sales or ammo?
Well, it was sort of happenstance that we got everything lined up before the election. So we had a couple of months where it was a good run up because everybody knew Hillary was going to win.
Yeah.
And so the whole gun industry was kind of freaking out. She's going to ban everything.
I knew a lot of people who bought their first gun because they were afraid Hillary Clinton was going to
win. And I was a consumer in the gun industry post Sandy Hook, so I was doing that. I bought a $200 AR-15 lower receiver like a bunch of other people. Is that what determines commercial gun sales in America? Like, pending regulations or pending political turmoil? Say that one more time.
Is that what sort of dictates, like, if people are going to suddenly buy a lot of guns? It's not like they're like, oh, it's Christmas time, we're going to buy everyone a gun.
It can be. I mean, it is seasonal as well. People buy stuff around the holidays, for sure. It's kind of a winter sport here in the Midwest as well. People shoot mostly at indoor shooting ranges, and so it tends to be a bit seasonal. But yeah, I mean, it definitely tracks with the political cycle. It does for sure. So we got up and running, and then obviously the election didn't go the way that people thought, and so there was a bit of a struggle for the first couple of years while we tried to figure out, the demand is dropping, so you can't just be the guy with the ammo that people are going to buy at any price. You have to find a niche, and so that got us into competitive shooting, in particular, people that do training classes that are big consumers, high volume consumers, are willing to pay a little bit more for a premium product. So it was actually great for us in that sense. I mean, if Hillary would have won and we would have been able to just sell whatever because people would buy whatever,
it'd be a different business.
We wouldn't have been able to develop the brand the way that we have, and so I'm kind of thankful for that, I would say, in retrospect.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.